All right, so in problems 19 and 20, we are asked to find the distance, the midpoint, and the slope. So we need to make sure that we have these formulas memorized. And so let's start with the distance. And so distance is the square root of, we're going to take the difference in the y values. So 6 minus a negative 5. And square that. And then the difference in the x values. And square that. And then if we add those together, that's going to give us, excuse me, the square root of 170. And then we would need to check and see if there are any perfect square factors, and there are no perfect square factors in 170, so that would be our answer. All right, now if we look for the midpoint, I'm going to take and look at the x values first, the x coordinates. I'm going to look at remember that these are averages, so I'm going to take the x's and add those together and divide by 2. It's going to give me 31 halves. And then I'm going to take the y coordinates, add those together, divide by 2, and that's going to give me 1/2. And so those are our coordinates of the midpoint. And the last one is our slope. So we're using the slope formula, rise over run. So we're looking at the differences in the x value, 6 minus a negative 5, over the difference in the y value, and so that's going to give us our slope. So we have our answers to our first three things here. This is the distance, this is the midpoint, and this is our slope. And our last thing asks us to do ask what the slope of the perpendicular line would be to this. So if our slope is 11/7, the opposite reciprocal would mean that that slope that is perpendicular to it would have to be a negative 7/11. And so there's our answer there. All right, 20 is the same problem, those same three things. And so we'll start with looking at the distance formula. So square root of, we're going to take the differences of the x values here and square that. And then the differences of the y values and square that. Add those together. We get the square root of 52. The square root of 52 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 17, which is 2 times the square root of 17. So we have our answer for the distance. Now we're going to look at the midpoint. The midpoint, we're going to take and look at the x values first. We're finding an average here, so we're going to add the x values together and divide by 2. And so that's going to give me negative 4. And then looking at the y values, I'm going to take and add the y values together and divide by 2, and that's going to give me a 6. And so we have the midpoint right here. Next thing, we're looking at the slope, and slope is equal to the change in the y value over the change in the x value And we always reduce that to lowest terms. And so we can see that we have our answer for the slope right here. Next thing it asks us is to then look at the slope that is perpendicular to that line. So the opposite reciprocal of negative 3/2 would be a positive 3/2. Problem 21 asks us to write the equation of the line in point-slope form going through the given points. So lots of things that we have to know. We need to know the distance formula, the midpoint formula, the slope formula, and now point-slope form. And so point-slope form, just as a reminder, tells us to take y minus the y value equal to the slope times x minus the x value. And so we can pick, the first thing we need to do is determine the slope because we're given 2 points. So the first thing I'm going to do is come over here and find the slope. So the difference in the y values over the difference in the x values. And that's going to give me negative 20 divided by negative 4, which will give me a slope that is positive 5. So I'm going to take my slope that I just determined right here, and I'm going to substitute it in right there. And then I'm going to select a point, doesn't matter which point, but I'm going to take and put the x value in for the x value there, and the y value in for the y value here. And that will be my point slope form. So let me do that substitution. And so I'm going to have y minus 18 is equal to my slope, which is 5, times x minus the x-coordinate, and the x-coordinate's negative 1. So x minus the negative 1 is x plus 1. And now it asked me for point slope form. This is point slope form. Okay, now it's going to ask me to take and to write that equation into slope intercept form. So I'm going to take and take this equation in point slope form. And there are 2 steps that I need to do here. Remember that slope intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So I'm solving for y. So my 2 steps are that I'm going to distribute the 5. And then I'm going to take the negative 18 over to the other side. Combine it with 5. And so what we have here, we were asked to put this into slope intercept form, which like we said is y equals mx plus b. And now here we have our answer in slope intercept form.